Hide in the guest room. Now. My father hissed through the phone. He was a former officer from a 3-letter intelligence agency people. 2 years later, the same relatives who rolled their eyes and called him paranoid that night were shaking and speechless. As always, before we dive into a story with an ending that's going to feel really satisfying for you, let's do a quick roll call. Type present and the city you're watching from in the comments. For everyone who has liked and subscribed, I pray that Allah makes your problems easier, widens your provision, and keeps your body healthy. Thank you, my friends. Now, listen carefully to my story. My name is Vanessa, and I grew up with a father who could never really tell me what he did for a living. When I was a kid, I just thought Dad works for the government meant boring offices and dusty files. It took me years to understand that the long trips, the sudden changes of plan, the way he always sat with his back to the wall in restaurants, they were all little signs of a world he wasn't allowed to talk about. By the time this story really started, I was 29, married, and living in a quiet suburban neighborhood with my husband Jesse and our 4-year-old daughter Valline. From the outside, our life looked like something out of a brochure. Gray 2-story house, white fence, tiny maple tree in the yard, and a driveway that curved just enough to make backing out annoying. On weekends, you'd see kids on bikes and people walking dogs. On weekdays, you'd hear lawnmowers and delivery trucks. It looked safe. It felt safe. At least at first. Jesse worked in finance, the kind of job where he could spend an entire dinner talking about clients and markets without really saying anything. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Collins, lived about 15 minutes away in a bigger, fancier house with darker wood floors and more expensive candles. They loved to introduce him as our successful son, and me as his wife Vanessa, in that tone that sounded polite but made me feel like a free accessory that came with his promotion. My father, Jack, lived alone in a modest apartment across town. He had retired from his job at the agency, as he called it, after my mom passed away. He wouldn't say the name of the place, just that it was the kind of office you only heard about in movies and political scandals. He had lines on his face that didn't match his age and a way of scanning a room that made waiters stand up straighter without knowing why. But with me and little Valline, he was just Grandpa Jack who brought puzzles and taught us how to spot a hidden camera in a clock. Jesse respected my dad publicly but rolled his eyes privately. "Your father thinks we're all in a movie," he would mutter whenever Dad warned me to change my routes or to never ignore a broken security camera. And my mother-in-law, Mrs. Collins, didn't even bother to hide her irritation. "People like that are trained to see danger everywhere," she said once, setting down her crystal glass a little too hard. "It's not healthy to live like that." I told myself they just didn't understand him. It was easier than admitting that, deep down, I didn't really understand him either. I knew he had done things he couldn't talk about. I knew there were years of his life compressed into a few vague stories about assignments overseas. I also knew that he had never lied to me, not about the big things. If he said something was wrong, something was wrong. That's why the night of the call is burned into my memory like a photograph. It was a Tuesday going into Wednesday, sometime in late fall. The house was quiet, the streetlights outside painting soft yellow lines across the ceiling. Jesse was working late with some urgent client dinner, according to his text. Valline was finally asleep after insisting that I check under the bed twice and in the closet 3 times. I had just drifted off when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up the room with a harsh blue glow. When I squinted at it and saw Dad on the screen, my first thought was that something had happened to him. I answered immediately, my voice thick with sleep. "Dad, are you okay?" "Don't talk," he whispered, so low I barely heard him. "Get up slowly. Take your phone. Don't turn on the lights. Go to the guest room and stay away from the windows. Now. Vanessa. Do not argue with me." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Dad, what's?" "Someone is in your driveway," he cut in. "Engine on. No lights. He's been there for 7 minutes. Move." I didn't ask how he knew. I threw the blanket aside, grabbed my phone charger out of habit, and slipped out of the bedroom. The hallway felt colder than usual. I tiptoed past Valline's room, cracked the door just enough to see her small shape under the blanket, and then headed to the guest room at the back of the house. Once inside, I closed the door but didn't latch it, just like he had taught me. "Okay," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I'm in the guest room." "Stay away from the window," he said. "Is Jesse home?" "No, he's at dinner. It's just me and Val." There was a pause long enough for me to picture his jaw clenching the way it always did when he was trying not to swear. "Is Valine's room visible from the street?" he asked. "Not really. The tree blocks it." "Good. Listen carefully. There's a car idling in your driveway. No headlights. The driver got out once, walked to the edge of your lawn, looked up at your house, then went back and sat inside again. He's waiting for something." I pressed my back to the wall, my legs starting to tremble. "How do you know this?" "I have a reason to keep an eye on your place," he said, in that careful tone that meant he was skipping details. "That's not important right now. Important is you staying put. Can you reach your upstairs window without being seen?" I thought of the tiny gap between the guest room curtains. "I can peek through a crack," I whispered. "Just a little." "Do it very carefully," he said. "Angle it down. Try to see if you can get even a glimpse without exposing your face. And put me on speaker." My fingers felt numb as I set the phone on the bed and crept toward the window. I made a tiny space between the curtains and lowered my head so my eye lined up with it. At first I saw only the dark outline of the maple tree and the faint glow of the street lamp. Then I saw it, a dark SUV sitting in our driveway, engine running, no lights, like a shadow that had decided to hum. "Dad," I whispered. "There's a car. I see it." "Do you see the plate?" he asked. I couldn't make out the numbers, but the plate had a distinctive frame, some kind of logo or emblem on it. I squinted, trying to memorize it. "No, but the frame is blue and silver. It looks like some company logo." "Okay," he said. I heard the faint clicking of keys on his end. "I want you to grab your phone, still on speaker, and take a picture through that gap. Use no flash. Then get away from the window." My hands shook as I lifted the phone and snapped a photo, then a second one. The images were grainy, but you could see enough. The shape of the car, the vague suggestion of a figure in the driver's seat, the specific frame around the plate. I ducked away from the window, my breath coming too fast. "Done," I said. "Send them to me," he replied. "Then lock your door and stay on the line." I did as he said, my fingers fumbling. I could hear his phone buzz faintly on his end as the pictures went through. There was a long silence, and then he exhaled sharply. "Okay. I know that logo," he said slowly. "You're not going to like this, honey." My stomach twisted. "Who is it?" "Right now," he said, his tone shifting into something I recognized from the rare times his past slipped into the present. "All you need to know is that this is not a drunk neighbor or a lost delivery guy. Someone is watching your house, and they are not supposed to know you live there." I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the carpet. For a few seconds, I couldn't feel my hands or my feet. I thought about the front door downstairs, the flimsy lock we never bothered to upgrade. I thought about the stairs, the distance between that door and my daughter's room. "What do I do?" I whispered. "Nothing," he said. "You wait. I've already made a call. You'll hear sirens in a few minutes. Don't go downstairs. Don't try to peek again. If you hear anything, you call out to me, okay?" I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Okay." True to his word, about 4 minutes later, faint at first and then louder, I heard sirens. The SUV in the driveway didn't move at first. Then the engine revved, and the car backed out onto the street, its lights still off, and sped away just before 2 patrol cars turned onto our road. When the red and blue lights bounced off the ceiling in jagged rhythms, I finally stood up. I watched the officers step out, shine flashlights across our yard, talk quietly into their radios. From the upstairs window, everything looked small and far away, like it was happening to someone else's life. That was the first night I realized my father's world was closer to mine than I had ever wanted it to be. What I didn't know was that it was also the first night my in-laws would start building a story about me that nearly cost me my child. The next morning, Jesse walked into the kitchen with his tie half done and his phone in his hand. He glanced at the coffee I had poured for him, then at my pale face. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, more impatient than concerned. I swallowed. "Did your mom call you?" I asked. "Or my dad?" He frowned. "About what?" I set down my mug, the ceramic making a soft clink on the table. "Dad called me at 3 in the morning," I said. "There was a car in our driveway. Engine running. No lights. He had someone watching our house, I guess. He made me hide in the guest room and call the police. They came, but the car left right before they got here." Jesse stared at me like I'd just told him I'd seen a ghost. "Seriously," he said. "You're telling me this now, when I have a 9 o'clock meeting?" My chest tightened. "I was in shock," I said quietly. "I barely slept. I thought you'd check your phone and see the missed calls." He sighed and rubbed his face. "Vaness, there was probably some teenager sitting in the driveway who realized it was the wrong house," he said. "Or a rideshare driver checking directions. Your dad overreacted, like always. And you let him drag you into it." I felt my cheeks heat up. "He sent the police here," I said. "They saw the car on the street. I have pictures." He blinked. "You took pictures," he repeated slowly, "of a random car. At 3 in the morning." I opened my mouth, then closed it. The way he said it made me sound crazy even to myself. "I'm just saying," he went on, grabbing his tie. "You know how your dad is. He doesn't really have anyone left except you. He sits around reading files and watching cameras, and then something moves and your phone rings. He spent his life dealing with dangerous people," I said, a little sharper than I intended. "If he says something isn't normal, maybe it isn't." Jesse's jaw tightened. "Or maybe he doesn't know how to live a normal life," he shot back. "And he's dragging you into his paranoia. Look, I'll call my mom later. She's going to freak out when she hears about this. Just don't tell her in your dramatic way, okay? You know how you get." "My dramatic way," I repeated. He kissed my forehead in a quick, distracted motion. "You know what I mean," he said. "You make everything sound like a thriller. I have to go." He left before I could answer, the door closing behind him with a soft thud that still felt like a slam. I stood there in the quiet kitchen, staring at the 2 coffee cups on the table, one untouched, wondering when exactly my version of events had become so negotiable. 2 nights later, we had dinner at Jesse's parents' house. Their dining room always felt more like a courtroom than a place to eat. Long table, heavy chairs, a chandelier that made everything a little too bright. Mrs. Collins liked to sit at the head of the table, as if she were presiding over a hearing. She waited until the plates were half empty before clearing her throat dramatically. "So," she said, fixing me with that polite, sharp smile of hers, "I heard we had some excitement at your house this week." I felt my stomach drop. Jesse didn't meet my eyes. "Mom," he muttered, "I told you not to." "I'm just concerned," she cut in smoothly. "We all are. Right, Richard." She glanced at her husband, who nodded, more at his plate than at either of us. I put my fork down. "There was a car in our driveway," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "My dad saw it somehow. He called me. The police came. That's all." Mrs. Collins let out a soft laugh, the kind that was almost a cough. "That's all," she repeated. "Darling, you do realize how that sounds? A mysterious car with no lights, some invisible watcher who just happens to alert your father at exactly 3 in the morning, the police arriving just in time for the car to vanish. It sounds like a story." "It happened," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I wanted. "I have pictures. There's a logo on the plate frame. My dad recognized it. And of course," she said, dabbing at her lips with a napkin, Your father would know all the logos in the world. After all, he spent his life chasing shadows, didn't he? Jesse cleared his throat. Mom, he said again, but there was no real force behind it. She turned to him. Jesse, I'm not saying this to attack her, she said. I'm saying this because I remember what happened after little Valline was born. I stiffened. I was tired, I said. That's all. You were more than tired, dear, she said sweetly. You were overwhelmed. You were seeing things, hearing things. Remember that. Hearing footsteps when no one was home, smelling smoke when there was nothing there. I felt every eye on me. I had postpartum anxiety, I said, the words tasting like medicine. My doctor said it was normal and that I handled it well. And we were all very supportive, she said. But that's exactly why this worries me. Your father calling you in the middle of the night to tell you there's some dangerous stranger outside. It's not good for you. It feeds your imagination. My father isn't trying to hurt me, I said quietly. He's trying to protect us. Is he? She asked, tilting her head. Or is he just unable to accept that the world doesn't revolve around his old job anymore? Sometimes people cling to danger because peace feels too empty. My face burned. He helped me, I said. I felt safer knowing he was watching. Watching, she repeated, emphasizing the word just enough that it twisted. Yes. Watching his grown daughter's house at all hours. Installing things, checking feeds, calling her at 3 in the morning. Darling, do you not see how intrusive that sounds? The room seemed to shrink around me. I looked at Jesse, begging him with my eyes to say something, anything. He sighed. Mom's just worried, Vanessa, he said finally. We all are. Maybe we should set some boundaries with your dad. Ask him not to monitor the house so obsessively. And maybe you should talk to someone. A professional. Just to make sure you're handling things okay. A therapist, Mrs. Collins added helpfully. There's no shame in that. We just don't want little Valline growing up in a home full of fear. My fork clinked against my plate. You think I'm making this up, I said, my voice trembling. You think I'm crazy. No one said that, she replied smoothly. You're putting words in our mouths. See, this is what I mean. Everything is drama. At the other end of the table, my father-in-law cleared his throat. Maybe we should change the subject, he mumbled, but the damage was already done. From that night on, it was like my name in their house came with an invisible footnote. Vanessa, the unstable one. The girl whose father couldn't stop living in the past. The girl who saw danger where other people saw shadows and wind. And I had no idea that they'd already started making plans based on that version of me. In the weeks that followed, little things began to shift. Jesse started coming home later, clients becoming a vague wall I couldn't see through. Mrs. Collins began dropping by our house more often, always with some excuse that felt more like an inspection. Bringing soup, because you look tired, bringing clothes for Valline, because she's looking a bit pale. Asking questions that sounded casual but left me feeling like I'd been cross-examined. My dad, meanwhile, grew quieter. He didn't push. He didn't call in the middle of the night again. But the next time we met, at a small cafe halfway between our houses, he slid a thick, unmarked envelope across the table. What's this? I asked. Insurance, he said simply. Don't open it unless you have to. Keep it somewhere safe. If anyone, and I mean anyone, pressures you to sign something about your house, your finances, or custody of Valline, you call me, and you call the lawyer whose card is inside. In that order. I frowned. Dad, that sounds dramatic. He gave me a tired smile. Maybe it does, he said. Humor an old man, will you? I spent decades learning how people cover their tracks. Your in-laws are very polished, very careful. They ask questions that aren't questions. They offer help that comes with strings. And I don't like the logo on that car we saw. I shivered. You found out who it belonged to? I found out who commonly uses that frame, he said. Let's just say some of my old colleagues have been hired by people who don't mind bending rules. And those people have the money to hire watchers who know how to idle in a driveway without leaving obvious fingerprints. I swallowed hard. Do you think it's about you? I asked. Something from your past? He hesitated. I think it's about both of us now, he said. But I need more proof. In the meantime, don't show that envelope to Jessie. Not yet. I looked down at my coffee, the surface trembling slightly from the movement of my hand. Jessie thinks you're paranoid, I admitted. He thinks I'm copying you. My father's expression didn't change, but there was a brief flicker in his eyes that hurt to look at. Do you think I'm paranoid? He asked. I thought about the car, the pictures, the sirens. No, I said. I think you see things other people don't want to admit are real. He nodded once. That's enough for me, he said. Just be careful, sweetheart. And if your mother-in-law invites you to a family meeting, call me first. I laughed a little, but it died quickly. Because deep down, I knew he wasn't joking. I took the envelope home and hid it in a place that would make him proud. Inside an old cereal box in the pantry, beneath a layer of unopened plastic bags. Then I tried to act like everything was normal. Everything came to a head one quiet Saturday afternoon. Jessie had taken Valline to the park with his parents, and I was alone at home, folding laundry on the bed, when I heard a soft knock at the door. When I opened it, I found a man in his 40s standing there in a neat grey suit, holding a briefcase. He had the blandly pleasant face of someone you'd never remember in a crowd. Mrs. Collins? He asked. That's my married name, I said slowly. Yes. He smiled. Wonderful. I'm Mark Henderson, he said, holding out a business card. I work with your husband's family. We're helping them with some estate planning, paperwork, the usual boring grown-up things. They asked me to take a look at a few documents with you, just to make sure everything is in order. A cold feeling crept up my spine. They're not here, I said. You can talk to Jessie when he gets back. He chuckled. Oh, I've already spoken to Jessie many times, he said. He's actually the one who suggested we catch you when things are quiet. He said you'd appreciate doing this without distractions. Something about the way he said, catch you, made my skin crawl. I don't sign anything without my husband present, I said. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes cooled slightly. Of course, he said. We're not asking you to sign your life away, Mrs. Collins. This is about protecting you. We just want to make sure that, in case anything happens, the house and your daughter are safe. My throat went dry. Anything? Like what? I asked. He shrugged lightly. Accidents, he said. Unexpected events. Or, given your father's controversial background, any issues that might arise from that. There it was. The word background dropped between us like a stone. I don't like talking about my father's work with strangers, I said. And I'm not comfortable with this. You can call me later and set up an appointment at your office. With my husband there. For a second, something flashed in his eyes. Annoyance, calculation, I wasn't sure. Then he pasted the professional smile back on. Absolutely, he said. We'll do that. I'll let Mrs. Collins know you're feeling a bit anxious. We'll move slowly. He left, but the air in the house felt heavier. As soon as the door closed, I grabbed my phone and called my father. He picked up on the second ring. Tell me what's wrong, he said immediately. There was a lawyer here, I said, my voice shaking. He said he works with Jessie's family. They want to protect the house and Valline in case something happens, especially because of your controversial background. There was a long silence. What's his name? Dad asked. Mark Henderson, I said. Grey suit, briefcase, smooth voice. I heard my father writing something down. Good, he said. Don't talk to him again without me. Don't sign anything. And don't be alone with your in-laws if they can help it. I'm already alone with them half the time, I said bitterly. They're my child's grandparents. Vaness, he said quietly, I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying this because I've seen this pattern before. People who want control over assets and custody sometimes start by creating a story that the other parent is unstable, influenced by dangerous people, prone to dramatic episodes. Sound familiar? I closed my eyes. At the head of a long table, my mother-in-law's voice echoed in my memory. You see things. You hear things. You make everything into drama. I can't just move out, I whispered. I can't yank Valline away from her dad and grandparents. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to. Not yet. I'm asking you to keep evidence of everything. Messages, calls, paperwork. And keep that envelope close. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Okay, I said. I didn't know it then, but someone else was also keeping evidence of me. 2 weeks later, Jesse asked me to come over to his parents' house for dinner, and added, almost as an afterthought, Mom wants to clear the air. Those 4 words should have sent me running. Instead, I put on a decent blouse, braided my hair so it looked like I'd tried, and told myself that maybe, just maybe, they were going to apologize for making me feel like a crazy person over the driveway incident. When I got there, the house felt off. There were no smells of dinner, no clatter of dishes. Just the low murmur of voices behind the closed living room door. In here, Jesse called. I pushed the door open and froze. Jesse sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped together. Mrs. Collins sat in her usual chair, back straight, legs crossed, a folder on her lap. Mr. Collins hovered by the window, nervously adjusting the blinds. And on the coffee table, laid out in a neat grid, were pieces of paper. What's this? I asked slowly. My mother-in-law's smile was almost gentle. We're having a little family meeting, she said. You've been under so much stress lately, dear. We're worried about you. About all of you. Jesse gestured for me to sit. Just hear us out, he said. Please. I stayed standing. What are those? I asked, nodding toward the papers. Notes, she said. From the last few months. Times when you've seen or heard things that weren't really there. Times when you reacted strongly to minor issues. Times when you let your father's fears spill into this home. My blood ran cold. You kept notes on me? I whispered. This isn't an attack, she said smoothly. This is documentation. You know how important documentation is, with your father's line of work. It protects everyone. Protects you, I shot back. From what? From my memory. Jesse stood up. Vaness, you've been spiraling, he said, his voice shaking. You barely sleep. You jump at every car that drives by. You keep checking the windows. You talk to your dad more than you talk to me. We can't live like this. I'm scared because someone watched our house, I said, my voice breaking. Because your mom and her lawyer friend are quietly planning something behind my back. And instead of helping me, you're, building a case against me. Mrs. Collins opened the folder on her lap and pulled out a thick stack of papers. These are documents, she said calmly. Papers that will make sure that, if anything happens to you, emotionally, mentally, or otherwise, your daughter will be safe. That the house will be managed properly. That your father's associations won't put anyone at risk. My hands started to tremble. I am not a danger to my child, I said. And my father is not trying to hurt anyone. Jesse walked around the table and stopped in front of me, holding out a pen. All we need, he said softly, is your signature. This is a power of attorney document, giving me the right to make decisions if you're not in the right state of mind. It's temporary. Just until things calm down. Mom's lawyer says it's standard. My father's voice echoed in my head. If anyone pressures you to sign something about your house, your finances, or custody of Valline, Call me. Where is that lawyer now? I asked. Mark. Is he here? Mrs. Collins' smile thinned. He doesn't need to be, she said. We've already gone through everything with him. This is just a formality. I took a step back. I'm not signing anything without my own lawyer, I said. And I'm not signing anything that calls me unstable. This is exactly what we're talking about, she said, her voice still maddeningly calm. You're paranoid. You assume everyone is against you. We are trying to help you, Vaness. You're trying to control me, I snapped. And my child. And my home. And you're using my father's job and a car in the driveway as an excuse. Jesse's face hardened. If you trusted me, you'd sign it, he said. If you cared about our daughter more than your father's conspiracy theories, you'd sign it. There it was. My child, a weapon in his mouth. Tears burned in my eyes. I care about her more than anything, I said. That's why I'm not handing her over to people who think I'm a problem to be managed. For the first time, Mrs. Collins' voice rose. You think we would hurt her? She snapped. You, who sees danger in every shadow, is accusing us of being dangerous? We have given you everything, and this is how you repay us? With accusations and drama. You've given me strings, I replied, my voice shaking but steady. And I'm done pretending they're ribbons. The room went very still. Jesse looked at his mother, then at me, then at the papers between us. Then I don't see how this marriage is going to work, he said quietly. Something inside me broke. What are you saying? I whispered. He turned to the coffee table and picked up another document, this one with a blue tab at the top. I hoped we wouldn't need this, he said. But Mom said we should be prepared. This is a petition for divorce, and a request for temporary sole custody of Valline, on the grounds of your instability and your father's dangerous influence. We haven't filed it yet. But we can. My knees went weak. You already filled this out? I asked. Before this conversation? We needed options, Mrs. Collins said. I stared at the papers, at the neat lines of text that reduced my entire life to phrases like emotional volatility and exposure to potentially dangerous individuals. My chest felt like it was caving in. You're framing me as the problem, I said. You're turning me into the villain in my own home. If you had just signed the first papers, she said, we wouldn't need the second. I took a step back, then another. I'm not signing away my rights, I whispered. Not today. Not ever. And if you try to use these against me, I will fight you. With what? She asked softly. Your father's old secrets? Your conspiracy pictures of a car in the driveway? Her words sliced deeper than I wanted to admit. Because on paper she was right. Right now, all I had was a midnight phone call and my father's word. Then I guess we're done here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned to leave, my legs unsteady. Behind me, Jesse's voice came out rough. If you walk out that door, he said, you make this easy for us. The judge will see a mother who ran away, who refused help, who chose her paranoid father over her child's stability. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. For a split second, I almost turned back, almost picked up the pen, almost let them box me in with their version of me. Instead, I opened the door. I'm going to get my own lawyer, I said without looking back. And I'm going to protect my daughter from people who think love looks like a stack of paperwork on a coffee table. Then I walked out, closing the door behind me on the life I thought I had. I didn't know it yet, but that sound, the soft click of the latch, was the start of my official fall, the moment they decided to turn their story about me into something much more dangerous. And they had no idea that I already had one envelope and 2 grainy photos that would eventually blow their whole plan apart. After my dad called at 3 a.m. about a car hiding in our driveway, my in-laws flipped the story. They painted me as paranoid, used my dad's old intelligence job as a weapon, tried to push power of attorney papers in front of me, and quietly prepared divorce and custody documents behind my back. I walked out of their house with nothing but an envelope from my dad and 2 grainy photos of that car, not realizing how close I was to losing everything. The night I walked out of my in-laws' house, I drove straight to my father's apartment. I don't remember half the streets I took. All I remember is gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white, and trying not to throw up every time I saw headlights in the rearview mirror. Dad opened the door before I even knocked. He took one look at my face, stepped aside, and said quietly, "Where's Valline?" "With Jesse and his parents," I croaked. "At the park. I came here alone. I couldn't think straight." He shut the door gently behind me. "Sit," he said. "Tell me everything." Slowly. I sat on his worn-out couch, hands trembling, and poured it all out. The papers on the coffee table, the documentation of my episodes, the power of attorney, the divorce petition waiting like a loaded gun. I told him about Mark Henderson showing up at our door. I told him about the way Jesse had said, "If you cared about our daughter more than your father's conspiracy theories, you'd sign it." By the time I finished, my voice was raw and my eyes were swollen. Dad hadn't interrupted once. He just sat there, elbows on his knees, fingers knitted together, that old briefing face locked in place. "So," he said finally, "they've already started the narrative." "The narrative," I repeated. He nodded. "The story about you," he said. "The unstable wife, the anxious mother, the woman influenced by her dangerous father. They've been building it quietly, so if they ever need to use it, it's ready to go." I swallowed hard. "I don't even know where to start," I whispered. "They're rich. They know lawyers. They have that file on me. I have, what? Your envelope and 2 blurry photos of a car." He tilted his head slightly. "And a recorded 3 a.m. call," he said. I blinked. "What?" He gave me a small, apologetic smile. "Old habits die hard," he said. "The moment I saw that car on the feed, I started recording. Audio on my side of the call, timestamps from the system that picked up the car, everything." His eyes softened. "I wasn't recording you to spy on you, sweetheart. I was recording the situation. And now I'm very glad I did." A strange warmth and terror mixed in my chest. "So you have proof that you saw the car," I said slowly. "And proof that you told me to hide. And proof that the police came." He nodded. "And I pulled the police report from that night," he added. "There's a record of your call and their arrival. What we still need is something that links that car, and that logo, to the people who are trying to paint you as unstable." I thought of the neatly dressed lawyer on my porch. "Mark," I said. "Mark Henderson. He said he works with the family, and that they're doing estate planning. You think he hired whoever was sitting in that car?" "I don't think," Dad said quietly. "I suspect. And in my old job, that was usually enough to start digging." I dropped my face into my hands. "What if they file those papers before we're ready?" I whispered. "What if they say I abandoned my kid because I walked out of that meeting?" He reached over and rested a hand on my shoulder. "Then we make sure you're not alone when the fight starts," he said. "First thing tomorrow morning, we're calling the lawyer in that envelope. And you're going to a therapist, your therapist, not one they pick, to get a proper evaluation. If they want to play the unstable card, we're going to show just how stable you actually are." The idea of a custody fight made my chest feel too tight to breathe. "But I don't have money for some big legal war," I said. "Jesse controls most of our accounts. The house is under both our names on paper, but his parents helped with the down payment. They'll make it sound like it's theirs." Dad's jaw tightened. "You've been paying mortgage and bills with your income too," he said. "We'll get the records. And as for money," he exhaled slowly, "let's just say I didn't spend my whole career living paycheck to paycheck. I've got enough put aside for the day someone I love needed a war chest. Looks like that day is now." The words, "someone I love," made my throat close up. "You'd do that for me?" I whispered. He squeezed my shoulder. "You and Valline are the only mission I care about now," he said. "We're going to protect you. But you have to be ready for this to get ugly before it gets better." I stared at the coffee table, remembering the neat stacks of paper in my mother-in-law's living room. "I think it's already ugly," I said softly. The next week was a blur of fear and small, practical steps. I moved into my father's apartment temporarily, sleeping in his tiny spare room with a borrowed mattress on the floor. I still took care of Valline, picking her up from preschool, bringing her to the park, reading her bedtime stories. But every interaction with Jesse and his parents now felt like a scene in a play where I didn't know my lines anymore. At first, Jesse tried to pretend things were normal. He'd bring Valline over to Dad's place for dinner, talking about work and weather while carefully avoiding the words divorce and custody. But the tension sat between us like a third person. One night, after we put Val to bed on the little mattress beside mine, we stepped into the hallway. The air felt heavy. "You don't have to make this harder than it already is," he said quietly. "Sign the power of attorney. Come home. We'll tell the court it was just a rough patch and we worked through it." "We'll tell the court," I repeated, "like it's a script you've already written." He rubbed his temples. "My mother is terrified," he said. "She thinks your dad is going to pull us into some scandal. She thinks your anxiety is getting worse. She just wants to protect her granddaughter. She wants to control her granddaughter." I said, "Those are not the same thing." His eyes flashed. "And your father doesn't want control." He shot back. "He has cameras on our house, Vaness. Cameras. He calls you at 3 in the morning to tell you there's a car in the driveway like we live in some spy thriller." "A car that was actually there," I said sharply. "And a call that probably kept us from being hurt." "Hurt by who?" Jesse demanded. "You still don't know who was in that car, do you? Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe it was a delivery. Maybe it was a coincidence. But because your dad saw it through one of his toys, suddenly we're all living inside his trauma." His words stung more than I wanted them to. "Whatever that car was," I said, forcing my voice to stay level, "you and your mother decided to turn it into a weapon to use against me. You kept notes on me, Jesse. Notes. Like I'm a patient, not your wife." He looked away. "We needed to be prepared," he muttered. "For what?" I asked. "For taking my daughter away." He didn't answer. And that, more than anything, told me everything I needed to know. The lawyer from Dad's envelope was a woman named Claire Taylor, and she was nothing like the lawyers in my head. She didn't wear a power suit or stare at me over gold-rimmed glasses. She wore a simple blouse, a ponytail, and the kind of tired but kind smile that said she'd seen this movie too many times. "You're not the first person to sit in that chair with this story," she said, after I finished pouring everything out for the second time in a week. "Controlling families. Wealthy in-laws. Narrative about mental instability. A convenient concern over a grandchild's safety. And a pile of pre-written documents ready to go. They're not very creative, but they're thorough." "They think my dad is dangerous," I said. "Because of his old job. Because he still watches things." Claire nodded slowly. "I read his file," she said. "He sent me the highlights. Retired. No criminal record. No disciplinary actions. That's not a man the court is going to label dangerous just because he worked in a scary building once." "They'll say he's paranoid," I said. "That he fills my head with fear. They already do." "Let them," she said calmly. "We're not going to fight them with opinions. We're going to fight them with evidence." She tapped a folder on her desk. "I've already requested the police report from the night of that 3 a.m. call. Your father sent me the time-stamped footage from his system and the audio recording of the call itself. Now we need to connect that car and that logo to Mark Henderson and your in-laws. If we can do that, everything they're building starts to crumble. My head spun. How do we even start? I asked. Your dad has already started, she said. I'm working with him. In the meantime, you're going to see Dr. Reed. Who's that? I asked. A psychologist I trust, she replied. Independent. Has nothing to do with your in-laws, your dad, or anyone else. You're going to meet with him, answer his questions honestly, and let him evaluate you. If you've had anxiety, we'll acknowledge it. If you've had postpartum issues, we'll acknowledge them. The difference is, we'll show that you sought help, that you followed medical advice, and that you're functioning perfectly well as a mother now. What if he says I'm broken? I whispered. She gave me a look that somehow held both patience and steel. I've been talking to you for an hour, she said. You're not broken. You're scared. There's a big difference. And even if he finds things to work on, that doesn't make you unfit. Judges don't expect perfect parents. They expect parents who try. I swallowed hard. And Jesse's petition? I asked. The custody thing. Can they really take Val away from me? They can ask, she said. And they'll try to make it sound more reasonable by pointing to your father and the spy stuff. But there's another side to this, Vanessa. You've been the primary caregiver. You've been the steady one in her daily routine. You haven't abandoned her. You walked out of a hostile meeting, not out of her life. Tears pricked my eyes again. I feel like I'm about to lose everything, I admitted. Claire leaned forward. You might lose some illusions, she said gently. But you're not going to lose your daughter without a fight. And I don't plan on losing. For the first time in days, I felt something under the fear, a thin, fragile thread of hope. Seeing Dr. Reed was both terrifying and strangely relieving. He had kind eyes and a cluttered office filled with small toys and puzzles on the shelves, the kind that kids fiddled with while parents tried not to cry. I'm not here to declare you perfect, he said in our first session. I'm here to see how you function, how you cope, and what supports you have. So let's start with what you're afraid I'm going to say. I laughed nervously. Honestly, I said. I'm afraid you're going to say my mother-in-law is right. That I'm dramatic. That I see danger where there is none. That I'm repeating my father's habits. He nodded. Okay, he said. And what do you think is true? I stared at the floor. I know I've had anxiety, I said quietly. After Val was born, I was scared all the time. I worried about everything. But I went to therapy. I did what they told me. I got better. There are still days when my heart races at random cars or noises. But I show up. I take care of my kid. I cook. I work. I'm here. How often do you neglect your daughter because of your fears? He asked. Never, I said, the answer hitting my tongue before I could think. If anything, I overdo it. I double-check locks and car seats. I'm annoying. But I don't ignore her. Ever. He smiled a little. That's an important distinction, he said. Let's talk about your father. So we did. We talked about his job, the secretive years, the way his shoulders still tensed when he heard a certain kind of siren. We talked about the cameras. We talked about the 3 a.m. call. Do you think he's paranoid? Dr. Reed asked. I think he's seen things that broke his ability to relax, I said. But he's never made up danger out of thin air. Maybe he sometimes sees risk where most people wouldn't. And maybe sometimes that risk turns out to be real. He nodded slowly, scribbling something down. And the people accusing you of instability, he said, have they ever lived through anything like he has? No, I said. They live in a world where nothing bad ever happens unless someone else failed. He looked up at me for a long moment. Okay, he said. Let's keep talking. By the time we finished 3 sessions, I was emotionally exhausted but oddly lighter. He didn't tell me I was fine. He didn't tell me I was broken. He told me I had anxiety, yes, And a history of postpartum issues, yes, but that I was functioning, engaged, and deeply bonded with my child. He put it in writing. Claire emailed me a copy of his report a few days later. "This," she said on the phone, "is going to matter." While I was going to therapy and trying to build a new rhythm of life in my dad's cramped apartment, my father and Claire were quietly building something else, a case. Dad traced the logo on the SUV's plate frame to a private security and risk management company called Helix Strategic. Helix marketed itself to wealthy clients who wanted discreet assessments of people in their lives. Business partners, new spouses, caretakers. "I've crossed paths with them before," Dad told me one evening, spreading printed pages across his small kitchen table. "They hire a lot of ex-Intel people. Good pay, flexible ethics." My stomach churned. "Are you saying my in-laws hired a private spy company to watch me?" I asked. "Maybe not officially, he said. "Officially, they might say they were assessing risk attached to you and your family. But when a Helix car sits in your driveway at 3 in the morning, that's not just background checking. That's pressure. That's theater. How can we prove it?" I asked. He tapped one of the pages. "Billing," he said. "Helix bills under a separate shell company name when they want to be extra discreet." I recognized the pattern on one of the sample invoices another client showed me years ago. I passed the shell name to Claire. "She's checking your in-laws' financial records as part of the divorce and custody disclosure." "Will they really hand that over?" I asked. "They're careful. Careful people make mistakes," he said. "Especially when they think they're smarter than everyone else." Claire called 2 days later sounding almost satisfied. "You were right about the shell company," she said. "There are payments from a Collins family trust to a firm with that name. Regular monthly amounts. And one extra payment marked night check. Residence." "The date and time?" "The night of your 3 a.m. call." I had to sit down. "Night check," I repeated. "They paid someone to sit in my driveway and freak me out." "They'll say it was to make sure you were safe," she replied. "They'll say they were worried about your dad, about strangers, about anything except the truth. But we have something they don't know we have: the recording of the call, the camera footage, the police report, the therapist's evaluation, and now these billing records. Each piece alone is suspicious. Put together, it starts to look like what it really is, a coordinated attempt to create fear, then use your reaction to build a case against you." "And the notes they kept on me," I said. "Can those be turned around?" She gave a short laugh. "Oh, absolutely," she said. "If they produce those in court, they're essentially admitting they've been collecting material to support a story about you instead of actually helping you. It makes them look calculating, not caring." For the first time, the word narrative didn't sound like something that belonged only to them. Life at Dad's place settled into a strange, tight routine. I picked up some remote bookkeeping work from an old friend, tapping away on my laptop at the small kitchen table while Dad played puzzles with Valline on the floor. We took turns cooking. He insisted on walking us to the car every time we left, scanning the street with that practiced, subtle attention that made me feel both watched and safe. I missed my house. My own bed, my kitchen, the silly maple tree that always dropped leaves in annoying patterns. But there was something oddly peaceful about the little apartment. We were cramped, but we were honest. No one here pretended a conversation about my mental health was for my own good, while sliding legal documents across the table. Still, rock bottom showed up in small moments. Like the night I realized I no longer had a key that fit my own front door. Like the afternoon I saw a photo on social media of my daughter at a birthday party, standing between my mother-in-law and Jessie, and realized no one had even texted to tell me she'd gone. Claire filed our own petition, a response to Jessie's initial moves, plus a request for joint legal custody and primary physical custody for me, with generous visitation for him as long as he wasn't trying to undermine my relationship with our daughter. We attached Dr. Reed's report. We attached the police report. We did not yet attach the Helix billing records or the audio recording. "Those are for later," Claire said. For the day they pushed the narrative too far in front of a judge. That day came faster than I expected. The first hearing was in a small beige courtroom that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. I sat at one table with Claire and my dad behind me. Jessie sat at the other table with Mark Henderson and his parents just behind them. Seeing Mrs. Collins there, in her immaculate blazer, her hair in a perfect twist, made my heart rate spike. She gave me a tight smile, the kind you give someone at a funeral. Mark did most of the talking at first. He painted a picture with carefully chosen words, a young mother with a history of anxiety, influenced by a father with an intense background, overwhelmed by frightening ideas, seeing danger in harmless situations. He mentioned my past therapy. He mentioned the 3 a.m. call. He even mentioned my dad's cameras. And while we appreciate her father's desire to protect his family, Mark was saying, we have to ask whether his constant surveillance and late-night panic calls are in the best interest of a young child growing up in that environment. I could feel my father's hands clench behind me. Then Mark gestured delicately to a folder. We've also kept notes, he said. Episodes where Vanessa reacted disproportionately to everyday stress. Times when she accused family members of plotting against her with no evidence. We present these not to shame her, but to show a pattern we believe the court should be aware of. I looked at those papers and remembered how it felt to see them spread out on the coffee table. The judge turned to Claire. Response? He asked. Claire stood, calm and steady. Your Honor, she said, we don't dispute that my client has had anxiety. We don't dispute that she sought help after her child was born. In fact, we're proud of her for doing so. What we do dispute is the story that her in-laws have built around those facts. Because a story is all it is. She walked to the center of the room, a slim folder in her hand. Let's start with the most dramatic example they've given, she said. The 3 a.m. call. According to them, this incident proves that her father is paranoid and that Vanessa is overly impressionable. They describe a mysterious car, an unnecessary panic, and a mother left shaking in the dark with her child. What they don't describe is what we're about to show you. She looked at Jessie's table. Mr. Henderson, you mentioned you have notes, she said. We have something more concrete. We have recordings, timestamps, and financial records. The judge raised his eyebrows. Financial records? He asked. Yes, Your Honor, she said. May I approach? He nodded. She handed him a stack of documents, then gave another to Mark, who took it with a frown. These, she said, are financial disclosures from the Collins Family Trust, as required in this proceeding. You will see regular payments to a firm that we have confirmed is associated with a private security and risk management company. You will also see an additional payment, labeled Night Check Residence, made on the exact date and time of the 3 a.m. incident. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Mrs. Collins went very still. Your Honor, Mark started. Those payments were part of a legitimate effort to ensure. Please let her finish, the judge said. Claire nodded. Thank you, Your Honor, she said. Now, in addition to those records, we have the police report from that night. It confirms that Vanessa's father called the police to report a suspicious vehicle idling in the driveway with its lights off for an extended period of time. Officers responded and, upon their approach, the vehicle left. This is all documented. This was not an imaginary threat. She turned to the judge again. And finally, she said, her voice steady, we have 2 more pieces. First, time-stamped footage from a security system showing the vehicle in question. The logo on the plate frame matches the logo used by that same private security company. Second, we have the recording of the 3 a.m. call itself. My heart hammered in my chest. I remembered the hook of my own story before it ever became a story. My dad's whisper, the sound of my own breathing, the trembling in my voice when I said, "There's a car. I see it." Your Honor, Mark cut in sharply. This is highly irregular. It's highly relevant, Claire said. My client has been painted as paranoid for responding to a situation that her in-laws themselves paid to create. They hired a private security firm to watch her house at 3 a.m, then used her understandable fear as evidence of instability. That's not concern. That's manipulation. The judge looked down at the documents again, his expression darkening. I'll allow the recording, he said. Play it. Claire nodded to the clerk. A small speaker was placed on the table in front of the bench. My father moved closer, his shoulders tense. Then, for the first time since that night, I heard it from the outside. My dad's low, urgent voice, the shakiness in my replies, the way my breath hitched when I said, "There's a car in our driveway." No lights. I watched my in-laws as the sound filled the room. Mrs. Collins' hands clenched on her purse. Mr. Collins' throat bobbed as he swallowed. Jesse stared down at the table, his face pale. The recording ended with my dad saying, "Someone is watching your house who is not supposed to know you live there." Silence wrapped around the courtroom for a long moment. "This," Claire said quietly, "is the moment they have been using to label her paranoid. They never mentioned that they were paying for that watch. They never mentioned the private firm. They never mentioned that the police took it seriously enough to respond. They only mentioned her fear." She stepped back. "Your Honor," she continued, "my client is not perfect. She has anxiety. She has been through postpartum issues. She has a father whose past has made him more vigilant than average. But she also has a therapist's recent report describing her as stable, functioning, and deeply bonded to her child. The people who want to take that child away from her, on the other hand, have been secretly collecting notes on her behavior while hiring companies to create situations that would trigger precisely that behavior." She let the words sink in. "If this is how they treat her," she said softly, "what do you think they'll do with a child they see as an extension of her?" My throat tightened. The judge looked at Jesse. "Mr. Collins," he said, "did you know about these payments?" Jesse's mouth opened and closed. I knew my parents were concerned," he said. "They said they were just checking that everything was safe. I didn't know the details." Mrs. Collins finally spoke, her voice trembling with controlled anger. "We did what we had to do to protect our granddaughter," she said. "We were afraid of him." She jerked her chin toward my father. "You don't know the people he might have made enemies with. He is the reason we needed surveillance." Dad's jaw worked, but he stayed silent. "And yet," Claire said calmly, "the only person Helix watched that night was my client's house. Not any hypothetical enemies. And when she reacted like any reasonable mother would, you wrote it down and added it to your file on her. That's not protection, Mrs. Collins. That's building a case." The judge held up a hand. "I've heard enough for today," he said. "We will need further testimony, but I can say this much. I am not comfortable with the idea of a family hiring private surveillance around a mother and then using her response as evidence of instability." He turned to our table. "For now," he said, "temporary custody will be joint, with the child residing primarily with Ms. Collins at her father's residence. Mr. Collins, you will have liberal visitation, but any attempts to interfere with the mother's relationship with the child will reflect poorly on your future requests. And I strongly suggest all extended family refrain from further documentation efforts outside of formal channels." The gavel came down with a solid thud. The sound felt like a crack in the wall my in-laws had been building around me. As people began to move, I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Across the room, Mrs. Collins was pale, her lips pressed so tightly together they had gone almost white. Jesse glanced at me for a brief second, something like regret flickering in his eyes, then looked away. The story they'd written about me had just been torn open in a very bright room, and the first draft of the truth had finally been read out loud. That hearing was not the end. Custody cases rarely end in one dramatic moment. There were more meetings, more paperwork, more quiet, exhausting days where I wanted to crawl under a blanket and never come out. But the power balance had shifted. With the judge's temporary order, I brought Valline officially to live with me and my dad. He gave up his bedroom so she and I could have the bigger room, insisting it was good practice for sleeping on uncomfortable surfaces if we ever needed to hide again. I rolled my eyes, but I cried a little in the bathroom later. We settled into a new routine: preschool drop-offs, cheap dinners at home, bedtime stories on the mattress that now had colorful sheets. Dad built a small wooden house-shaped bookshelf for her by hand, and she decided it was better than the big house, because Grandpa Jack lets me stand on the couch sometimes. Jessie visited regularly at first. He'd pick her up, take her to the park, bring her back with little drawings and stories. Our conversations were stiff but civil. One afternoon, as we stood awkwardly in the doorway after he dropped her off, he cleared his throat. "I didn't know about the night check payment," he said quietly. "I swear. Mom handles most of the trust stuff. I thought they were just looking into your dad, not staging things." I studied his face, trying to decide how much was honesty and how much was damage control. "You knew they were keeping notes on me," I said. He looked away. "I thought it was just like journaling," he muttered. "So we wouldn't forget incidents if we needed to talk to a professional." "A professional you picked," I said. "A professional who would only see your side of the story." He winced. "I'm sorry," he said. "For a lot of things. I don't know how to fix it." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "I'm not asking you to fix it," I said. "I'm asking you not to make it worse. Stop letting your mother speak for you. And stop trying to turn my father into a monster just because he sees things you don't want to see." He nodded slowly. "I'm trying," he said. "I just grew up believing my parents always knew best. Then maybe it's time you grow up a little more," I said gently. "For her sake." I jerked my head toward the hallway where Val was singing to her stuffed animals. He gave a small, sad smile and left, without another word. The final hearing came a few months later. By then, the case file was thick. Dr. Reed's full evaluation, updates from court-appointed observers, financial records, documented messages from my in-laws that sometimes read one way and, with context, read very differently. One of those messages, from Mrs. Collins to Jessie, caught the judge's attention during the written review. "At least the car thing showed us how far gone she is. We need to collect everything. It will help later." Claire highlighted that line with almost surgical satisfaction. "People forget that texts are just as permanent as legal documents sometimes," she said. In the final hearing, they tried one last time to lean on the old narrative. Mark spoke of concern and stability and long-term emotional patterns. Mrs. Collins spoke of fear for her granddaughter and exposure to dangerous personalities. But by then, the story had changed in the judge's eyes. We had shown our plants, the envelope, the recording, the logo, the bills, the texts. We had turned their own tools into evidence of their manipulation. My father testified briefly, careful with his words. "I won't pretend my work didn't affect me," he said. "It did. It made me more cautious than most. Sometimes I see patterns where others see coincidence. But I never imagined my caution would be used as a weapon against my daughter. I installed surveillance to protect her, not to feed someone else's story." When it was over, the judge took a long time to speak. When he finally did, his voice was firm. After reviewing all the evidence, he said, "It is clear to this court that Ms. Collins is a capable, loving parent with a history of anxiety that she has managed responsibly through therapy and support. It is also clear that the Collins grandparents allowed their concern to cross into control, engaging private surveillance and documentation in ways that undermined rather than supported this family." He looked directly at Jessie. "Mr. Collins," he continued, "it is my recommendation that you seek individual counseling to untangle your own loyalties and boundaries with your parents. Your relationship with your child will suffer if you do not." Jessie nodded silently. "As for custody," the judge said, "primary physical custody will remain with Ms. Collins. Legal custody will be joint. The child will reside primarily with her mother and maternal grandfather. Visitation with you, Mr. Collins, will be set on a generous schedule, with the understanding that neither extended family will disparage the other parent in the child's presence. The Collins grandparents will have visitation only during your scheduled time with your daughter, and only with your presence, for at least 1 year. After that, this arrangement can be revisited. He paused. And finally, he added, I am ordering that no party engage any private surveillance around Ms. Collins' residence without a court order. If I find out anyone has violated this, it will have serious consequences. Mrs. Collins made a small choking sound. Her perfect composure cracked for just a second. The gavel came down again. This time, the sound didn't just crack a wall. It felt like a door closing behind one life and opening into another. 2 years after that first 3 a.m. call, I stood in another bright room. This time, a small community hall decorated with paper stars and construction paper drawings. It was a school event. Parents sat on folding chairs. Kids ran circles around us, sticky-fingered and loud. Jesse sat 2 rows back, watching Val line with a soft smile. He'd taken the judge's advice more seriously than I expected. He'd started therapy. He'd started saying no to his mother in small, clumsy ways that still surprised me. My in-laws were there too, but they were different now. Quieter. Less sure of their place at the center of everything. Some of their social circle had drifted away when whispers about that custody case started. People like to gossip more than they like to take sides. I felt my dad move up beside me. He wore the same navy jacket he'd worn to court, the one he said made him feel less retired and more useful. You okay? He asked. I looked around at the kids, the chaos, the ordinariness of it all. Yeah, I said. I am. He nodded, then tilted his head toward the stage where the kids were lining up to sing. Remember the first night? He asked quietly. When I called you about the car? Like it was yesterday, I said. I still hear your voice sometimes when I wake up at night. He winced slightly. Sorry, he said. I didn't mean to leave you with that. I shook my head. You didn't leave me with that, I said. You left me with proof. You left me with a way to show people who didn't believe me that I wasn't crazy. That you weren't crazy. You saved us in more ways than one. He smiled, just a small twitch at the corner of his mouth. I'll take that, he said. Later that week, when I was cleaning out a drawer in Dad's apartment, our apartment now, since we decided to stay and just find a bigger place together, I found a small flash drive labeled in his careful handwriting, Driveway Night, Master Copy. I turned it over in my hand, feeling its tiny weight. This little piece of plastic had helped crack open a story that could have ruined my life. I walked into the living room, where Dad and Val were building a lopsided tower of blocks. I found this, I said, holding up the drive. What do you want to do with it? Dad looked at it for a long moment. Keep it, he said. Not because we still need it for court. We don't. Keep it as a reminder. That when people tell you that you're just imagining things, sometimes you're not. And that having evidence doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you prepared. I nodded slowly. Then I went to my room, plugged the drive into my laptop, and played the recording one last time. Hide in the guest room. Now, his voice said through the speakers, calm and sharp. Listening to it again, in a quiet room full of toys and laundry, I felt something I hadn't felt that first night. Power. Not the kind that comes from controlling other people, like my in-laws had tried to do. The kind that comes from surviving the story they wrote for you and writing your own instead. When the recording ended, I hit stop and ejected the drive. I put it in a small box with important papers, birth certificate, custody order, a copy of Dr. Reed's report, and a few photos of me and Val and Dad at the park. It was our family's weird little archive. Proof that we had been tested and that, somehow, we were still here. Now, when something scares me, an unexpected knock, a strange car, a late-night phone call, I still feel my heart speed up. I still double-check the locks. The difference is, I no longer apologize for it. I've learned to listen to my instincts, to sort out which fears belong to the past and which ones are warning me about the present. And I've learned that the most dangerous stories aren't the ones that start with a mysterious car in the driveway. They're the ones other people write about you when you're too scared to speak for yourself. That, more than anything, is what my CIA father really taught me. From everything I went through, I learned that being careful doesn't make you crazy, and asking for help doesn't make you weak. Now I realize that we should never let people who want control over us be the only ones telling our story. If you're in a situation like mine back then, please remember, your fear might be trying to protect you, and your evidence might be the key that finally makes everyone else see the truth. If you've ever gone through something similar or you want to share your own story, write it in the comments below. Don't forget to share this story with your friends, like the video, and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories.